Hey guys, today I've got a guest with me who is an expert at performance. This guy has worked with athletes, corporate entities, people all over the world and helped them perform better. He's written books about it and he comes very highly recommended from some friends of mine who I respect a lot. And just from what I've seen of his work, of his writing, and the short conversation that I've had with him already, I'm really looking forward to diving into his paradigm and his ideas of how all this works. So I want you all to say hi to Garret Kramer. Garret, thank you very much for being here today.
Okay, thanks for having me, bud.
Excellent. So basically, your area of expertise is performance. Is that right?
Basically, that's right. That's where it all started, yeah, no doubt.
So let's start with the simplest question. What does it take for people to perform at their best?
It takes an understanding of how the mind works. So that's the simplest answer I can give you to the simplest question.
That's perfect. So, understanding how the mind works, there are a lot of different theories on that topic out there. I mean, I've studied psychology myself, education, all that stuff, and there are all these different, approaches to understanding the mind. What would you say is the way the mind works?
Well, I'll answer for sure, but to be clear, when I say how the mind works, I'm not talking about the human brain. So a lot of the theories, virtually all the theories that you just spoke to, they're talking about the brain. If you really dig deep and look at the principles taught throughout time about the mind, and you got to dig deep to find it, actually, you'll see that those principles are pretty much a constant. So we're kind of pointing people in a direction away from the biological nature of the brain and toward the spiritual nature of the mind. All right, so that's a really important distinction. And again, if you look at the birth of all religions, or at the core of psychology, they all started out as the study of mind. Now, a lot of dogma was then thrown on top of it all. Actually, talk about simplicity, it was too simple for people to just study the mind or the soul or the spirit. It was just too simple. So we went to behavior, and as we went to behavior, we started to lose touch with this, the principles, with truth. So in my work, I'm pointing players, coaches, in business, whatever, personal issues, whatever it is, back to how the mind works and away from the intellect. Now, how does the mind work? Well, in essence, when I say that, what I'm pointing to is how human beings create their experience. So what I'm saying is our experiences, what happens in the world out there, do not create our state of mind. Our state of mind creates our experience. So that's a fundamental shift in how psychology, and most cognitive therapy, all this stuff, addiction counseling, how they treat these issues, performance too. At the core of it really is an understanding that our thinking is what creates our feelings, and as opposed to the outside world creating our feelings. And that really is the core of what I teach people. So in other words, everything that goes on inside of you is coming from thought. So there's a direct link between thought and feelings. There is no link whatsoever between circumstance and feelings.
Right.
And the more people grasp that, in my mind, the better they perform.
Cool. So I want to touch on that because it's this whole inside out versus the outside in thing, because you kind of summarized it perfectly there in the way I see it. But still, there's a lot of people out there who go around saying, oh, the weather's making my boyfriend or girlfriend made me, did this to me and made me angry and all this. How can people get past that? Like, how can they actually, because it's very convincing. Like myself, when it's cold, I don't like the cold. I like the heat. I like it when it's warm. So in my mind, a lot of the times, even though I know this and I agree with you completely, a lot of the times when I walk out my door and it's cold, I'm like, ah, damn weather. No, for a second, I get caught up in that illusion. So is there a way that people can break out of that? And
The, the, there's not a magic bullet, so to speak, TJ. There's not a strategy or a method or a coping mechanism you can reach to when you walk outside, or when, you know, maybe in our world, maybe a client won't get back to us or something, and we feel a little bit weird. And there's not a coping mechanism that you want to turn to. Now, we can talk about why that is in a second. But to your question, the way that you up your resilience, so to speak, the way you activate your innate resilience is to understand deeper that it's inside out, not outside in. So the more a person understands that, the quicker they'll shift. It's not that you won't have those moments where you say, I wish it was warm, or why did he do that, or she act that way, or whatever. We all do, and we'll talk about that too. But the more you understand what's happening, the less that will happen, A, and B, when it does happen, the quicker you'll snap out of it. So you could look at it this way. If I'm putting my hands up here so everyone can see, right? So if this hand is, okay, my circumstances create my feelings, outside in, and this hand is my thinking creates my feelings, inside out. We all exist somewhere on this spectrum. So it's a spectrum of understanding, and every single human being on this planet is hanging out somewhere on that spectrum. Okay, you and me included. So if you look at people that have done damage to this world, okay, maybe Hitler, Osama bin Laden, whatever, okay, they're over here somewhere. Now, they're not all the way over here. No one is, but they're close. They're close. Okay. If you look at people who have really done amazing things and you know, brilliant advancements, uncovered truth. You're talking about the Gandhis of the world, the Martin Luther Kings, right? They're over here, not all the way, because they get caught up in their thinking too sometimes, but they were over here. So you and I were somewhere on here. Everyone who's listening to this is watching this is somewhere on this spectrum. Now, my role, as I see it, is to point people in this direction and get them walking this way, right? Now, and that's actually my only role. My role is not to come up with a strategy or technique to get them thinking a certain way or doing a certain thing. No, sir. My role is to point them in how the system works and get them walking that way. And what I've found is that people who see it, okay, wait, this makes some sense. It's not the world that's creating my feelings. It's me, because I've looked at that situation sometimes and it drives me crazy, or it looks like it's driving me crazy. But then at other times I've dealt with the same situation and it hasn't bothered me at all. I have answers. Now, so clearly it can't be the outside. Like, good example of that would be traffic, you know, or maybe getting cut off in traffic. Sometimes you get really upset, you want to kill the guy, and sometimes you're like, oh, go right ahead, sir, no big deal, you know, whatever. So clearly it can't be getting cut off that's causing my anger or my insecurity. It's got to be something within me, because sometimes it happens that I'm mad, and sometimes go right ahead. So, that's interesting. Inside out, not outside in. Now, again, the more we point people in that direction, it's not that there's going to be times where they step off that direction. You just described it. But rarely, in my experience of doing this for a long time, rarely do people turn around. In other words, once you see it, you could be all the way on this end of the spectrum. There's a pretty good chance you're going to start walking this way. Again, you may stumble. I stumble. We all do. But we jump off the path and we keep going in this direction. We don't turn around, because it becomes really obvious once you see how it works. It's virtually impossible to go back the other way.
That's perfect. And I was reading your blog, and which is a brilliant blog. You guys should check it out, garretkramer.com. And
Right.
it was why analyzing emotion is not in your best interest.
Mm.
Uh, and I feel that touched a lot on what you just said, but could you elaborate on that? Like, because a lot of people, I know, like psychology, traditional psychology, they kind of go into all that and they grab the emotion, all this stuff. And you have a different take on it. Would you care to elaborate?
Well, I have a different take on it, but I want to be clear. It's not my take. I mean, I'm just writing about it. Mike. I know you had Jamie Smart on. He has the same take, and we all have the same take. We just don't know it. To be honest with you, I'm not. I mean, I didn't make it up, I guess is the point. It's just kind of how it works. Now, why is analyzing emotion not in our best interest? Because when people analyze emotion, there's only one thing that they do, and that they look outside. So let's say I'm sitting here at my desk in my office, and I feel really anxious. The standard the standard operating procedure in the world of counseling or psychology, therapy, life coaching, whatever, including sports psychology, would be, let's figure out why I feel this way. Is it my clients? Is it my book? Is it what my wife made me for breakfast? Is it the God I got to see tonight? Is it the fact that I'm flying on an airplane in 2 days? I mean, why? And it becomes a wild goose chase. A wild goose chase. And frankly, if I feel anxious and look outside to analyze why, I can come up with 1,000 things. I could go to my past. I go to my future. I go, well, my desk's a little messy. I got to take out the garbage later. I mean, it's all over the place. So, and the funny thing about it is, when I'm not anxious, all those same things are still present. So, if those external circumstances, those things outside of me had the ability to make me anxious, wouldn't I be anxious all the time? And clearly, I'm not. I'm not. So we don't. It doesn't. At least to me, it's not logical to look out there. It's a wild goose chase, and that's why people stay in therapy. That's why people, find themselves embroiled in these thought attacks. What
And it
happens?
seems
Yeah, sorry.
to me too that analyzing your emotion like that is just reinforcing, attributing your emotions to whatever you can see out there instead of realizing, as you said a few minutes ago, that it's all coming from inside of you.
Well, again, go back to the spectrum, man. So what happens is we all start out over here. I mean, no one is born into this world over here. We're all inside out. There's a baby who's being born right this minute, who just came into this world. Okay, that baby has no knowledge of an outside-in connection. 0%. That baby is 100% inside out. Okay, he doesn't know, or she doesn't know, that the reason that they're upset is because the light's in the operating room. They don't know that they're upset because they're being born to a single mother. That's a problem. I mean, you can go on and on. They don't know any of that. Okay. Now, as that person grows, as that child grows, because human beings are thinking creatures, all on our own, we will form these outside-in connections. Now, you couple that natural fact with the fact that turn on the television, watch a sporting event, watch the news, watch Dr. Phil, whatever. All these people are telling us that it is outside in. They're providing these circumstantial excuses and explanations for why we may feel anxious. Oh, it's because your parents were divorced, or this, that, and the other thing. Okay, or that you have a handicap, or you go on and on. None of that's true. So now you take the fact that we live in a physical world and we're thinking creatures, and it looks that way, plus it's reinforced from all sides. We start walking in this direction I'm talking about. So that's what happens to all of us to varying degrees. Now you may say, well, why to varying degrees? I'll answer every question you asked me today except that one, because there is no answer for that one. And if we try to find an answer for it, we're going to complicate things. It just is. There's no, you could have two people growing up in the same household, and one could be over here when they're age 40, and one could be over here. And there's no rhyme or reason for it. And if we look for one, we're going to look outside, and we're going to miss it. Now, another factor to why analyzing emotion or feelings is not in our best interest, and it's just very simple, is that in order to do so again, go back to me sitting here in my office, I feel anxious, I start to identify reasons why. Identifying reasons why, looking outside, so to speak, takes an incredible amount of thought. It takes effort. It takes thought. Okay. And I will tell you that the only reason I feel anxious is because I've got too much thought in my head to begin with. So if I'm going to try to solve my jammed up head is what's causing my anxiousness. Remember I said before, thought, feeling. There's a connection there. My jammed up head is causing that anxious feeling. If I look outside, which requires more thinking, if I use a mental strategy, more thinking. If I look to my past, oh my gosh, more thinking. So in order to analyze all this feeling, I've got to think a lot. That takes me down even more because I'm feeling my thinking to begin with. So what we're saying is, if a person feels anxious and looks outside and then tries to fix it, that takes thought. They'll go in the wrong direction. If a person understands what's happening, like you describe yourself when you step outside the door and you feel cold, you kind of know you don't like it for a second, but then you realize, wait a second, this is coming from me. You self-correct. Very important part of this discussion about mind is that looking outside blocks your ability to self-correct. Looking inside activates the human mind's ability to self-correct. And we didn't discuss that, but human beings are totally equipped to get over any anxious feelings. We are blessed with the psychological immune system. Now, nobody knows about it, but we have it. So we have it like a physical immune system. We also have a psychological immune system, or an ability to self-correct. The only reason we don't self-correct is we continue to look outside and analyze and try to figure it out, adding more thought, which again blocks our ability to self-correct.
Exactly. I think to the metaphor, if you will, or simile of getting a cut on your hand, and if you just leave it alone, then your physiological immune system or your body is going to fix it. And we have that same, as you say, the psychological self-correct. But if you keep picking, you're just going to keep agitating it. It's going to feel worse. It's going to take longer to heal, and when it does, you might have a scar. And a lot of the same seems to be true for the psychological immune. If you're trying to do something with it, then all you're doing is getting in the way and making it more difficult to actually heal.
Yeah, I many years ago, I was a total fixer. 25 years ago, I had grown up and I was really pointed in that direction. And I thought that the way out of any problem was to just fight my way out of it. Look for the reason, fix the reason. Don't be a doormat, fix it, make it right, work your butt off, whatever. And it almost drove me crazy. Ultimately, I mean, I was so much looking in this direction and blocking, obstructing my natural ability to find peace of mind. to find understanding and compassion and love, that I was going crazy. And then one day I said to myself, clearly this outside in strategy, going to see therapists, searching your past, trying medication, exercise, yoga, whatever, all this. And by the way, I'm not saying anything wrong with exercise or yoga. I love both of them, but not as coping mechanisms. But at that time, all of this was clearly stepping on the gas pedal with my tires in mud. I was just going deeper. And then I woke up to the fact that, wait a second, this isn't working. So why don't you just stop, until you could. And I didn't know about the mind's ability to self-correct yet, but I knew that I had an insight that something just wasn't adding up. Finally hit me after just, you can either kill yourself or just wake up, So I woke up, got lucky, and I took my foot off the gas pedal. And almost instantaneously, I started to feel better. Now, nothing had changed. All these circumstances that the therapists and the psychiatrists were telling me were the reason for my uneasiness, my anxiety, my depression. All these reasons were still present, but I felt good. So I was like, wait a second, something's not right. It doesn't add up. And then it occurred to me that it works inside out. And it also occurred to me that, wait a second, what's happening is I'm self-correcting. That's what human beings are born to do. And I kind of likened it, even years ago, I likened it to a young child. And then I saw it in my own kids when they were young, who could have a temper tantrum, 2 years old, terrible twos, meltdown, temper tantrum, and then they snap out of it. And like it never happened. They certainly don't go to therapy, or I hope they don't. Some of them do. I mean, but, unfortunately, they self-correct and they're fine. So it all kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. Whoa, wait a second, I got to teach this. This is, I got to bring this to my I was coaching high school hockey at the time. So I got to bring this to my players. Wow, this is great. And then sure enough, I did that. And we started to win like crazy. We had the same team. We were 500. Next thing you know, we're winning state championships. I mean, it was just bizarre. It was bizarre. And that's kind of how it all took off. And it was the luckiest break I ever got was that year of depression. It was the luckiest break I ever got because I don't know. I mean, it really woke me up to how the system works. And it just set my whole life in a different direction. Not only this direction we were talking about before, but my career, I was working in the construction business. I was a good coach, but I had this was the last thing. I was the last person on the planet that was, that you would think would be teaching the spiritual essence of mind. It just wasn't in my, I never would have guessed it. And it's funny because people from my past, in high school and, hockey players I played with back in the day, they can't believe it. Like they're like, what, is this the same guy? This is almost impossible. But then they talk to me. I'm not really much different. I don't know. I guess I come across a little different, but that's all because I'm looking in this direction, not this one.
That's a very interesting story. I thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So it might be obvious to a lot of people who are listening, but could you difference in when it comes to coaching for performance? What's the major difference in approach from the outside in to the inside out?
Well, it's very there's one difference really. The standard approach, which is outside in, is to a player's in a funk, performers in a funk, and we're going to give this player something to do to get out of the funk. So it could be a deep breathing technique. It could be a visualization strategy, positive thinking, affirmations, going through routines in golf. That's a very common one. Stick to your routine. These are all outside in strategies that require thought. Now, athletes. So the way I look at it is, I'm gonna get them in this direction. I'm gonna teach an understanding. I'm not gonna provide a how-to. Right? Now, again, the reason for that is a how-to requires thought. So for a player to go through a visualization strategy, okay, I'm going to visualize the golf ball flying, I'm going to drawing, whatever, that takes thought. And the reason the player is in a funk to begin with is because he or she is overthinking. So for me to give them anything that requires more thinking as a way to find clarity just doesn't make sense. Now, athletes will always tell you that when they're at their best, they're not thinking. It just kind of falls in place. How did that happen? Came out of nowhere. No expectations, no goals, just fell, I got lucky, whatever. So a player who, that's clarity to me, right? So that's a state of flowing thought. Everything's moving, running. Energy is just powering the system. Thoughts flowing through us. It doesn't make any sense when a person is not in that place, clutter, jammed up thought system, to give them something that requires more thought. It's just but that's the paradigm. That's what's taught. Now, here's what happens, which you may say, well, where did that ever start? How did that start? Well, basically, we could trace this back to Freud and even before him. But Sigmund Freud wasn't even a psychologist. He was, I don't care if he was or he wasn't, but he was a medical doctor who laid somebody down on a couch and discussed, and this person was in a funk. They actually had an arm injury and they were really mentally jammed up for whatever reason. And they had an arm injury. They came to Freud, and Freud had this person talk about his past. Okay? That's a strategy. Okay? Very similar to a sports psychologist giving an athlete a positive thinking strategy or a routine strategy. Okay? What happened to this patient of Freud's was he got better. He got better. So Freud made a connection between the regression therapy, going back in the past, and the fact that this patient of his, this patient's head cleared. All right? And that took that psychology in such a bad direction, because what happened was the patient's psychological immune system kicked in. He self-corrected in spite of the outside-in strategy. So in spite of the fact that he was adding thought, our psychological immune systems are so powerful that we can, that we can overcome it. And what happened is this patient self-corrected, and Freud didn't know about that. So he made a connection between the strategy and the better feeling, as opposed to the mind, how the mind works and the better feeling, and outside in ever since. I'm not blaming him. There's plenty of other people who do the same thing, but that is kind of the origin of it all. And it happens all the time in sports psychology. You'll get a player, professional athlete, who will get a technique or a tool, strategy, and apply the strategy and then have a great game. And then the next night, he'll apply the same exact strategy and play awful. Because the great game had all to do with the player's natural ability to self-correct. It didn't have anything to do with the strategy. The next night, however, he's throwing more thought on top of thought, and he didn't self-correct. And then he says, oh, I need a different strategy. Give me a different one. Maybe I need a different psychologist. Maybe I'm not doing it right. And before you know it, he gets so jammed up he can't see straight. Then, after about a week of this, he says, forget it. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to play. And then he plays great because it all goes out the window.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's do, if it's okay, like a hypothetical situation where an athlete comes to you, a top athlete for a long time, and all of a sudden nothing seems to work, and they're getting caught up, and like they're not performing in their games or competitions or whatever sport they're in. They're used to all the sports psychiatrists who've given them, affirmation and visualizations and all these techniques, and then they come to you. What's your first order of business? Like, how would that first conversation look?
Well, I don't know exactly, but it looks a lot like what we've talked about, to be honest with you. But I mean, it 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 really does. I mean, I don't. It's just like our conversation. We didn't script it. I don't know exactly how it looks, and I don't even remember how other ones looked, but for the most part. But it's just my obligation to not perpetuate this misunderstanding. I've got to cut it off, and I've got to cut it off quick. And that's all I know. And I may, especially if it's someone who doesn't know about my work, but maybe is referred to me, because I do a lot of that work. Like if someone's really in a bad way, but doesn't know what they're about to hear, I may ask the player or the person, do you, actually, I think I do ask this frequently now that I'm thinking about it, but I will ask a person, to a certain degree, do you believe that your feelings come from your thinking? I'll ask that question. I'm going to say 99.9% of the time, no matter how jammed up someone is, they're going to say yes. Then I'll say, okay, to a certain degree, do your feelings come from your circumstances? And 99.9% of the time, they're going to say yes. Now, that gives me a good starting point, because we don't work both ways. We just don't. But most of us believe we do. Now, we've already discussed how I know we don't work both ways. That doesn't mean it doesn't look like sometimes to me that we do. But I still, even though it looks that way, doesn't mean I'm walking this way now. I just get caught in that illusion sometimes. And, it looks that way. So, and it's a loaded question. I say to a certain degree, because I want them to, I know that's happening. I know that's happening. And it's my obligation, as I said, to point that person in a direction where, no, we don't work both ways. I mean, I was going to say you're better off thinking we work the wrong way than both. But we work inside out, and that is an absolute principle. That is an absolute truth. It's not a theory or a concept or my opinion. It is a unequivocal truth. It's like gravity. It's if I drop this pen, it's going to fall 100 times out of 100. Well, 100 times out of 100, when a human being is feeling bad, that's coming from their thinking. The outside world is neutral 100 times out of 100, and that is a truth. And again, my role is to point people in that direction. And yeah, how it plays out, aside from that maybe opening question, I don't know.
Of course. So how does understanding this, and I know you've already talked about this, but I want to kind of get it out there. How does understanding this actually make people perform better?
Well, I'll give you an example. If a golfer's got a 6-foot putt to win the Ryder Cup, and he feels incredibly nervous, his hands are shaking, he's totally embroiled in anxiety. Okay? It's not a problem, by the way, not even a little. If that player believes that his anxiety is coming from the fact that it's the Ryder Cup, this big event, he has teammates now, he has a continent or a country behind him, all this stuff. then he's a victim. He may yip the ball in the hole, but it's going to be 1 in 100. Okay. If a player in that state of mind, sheer anxiety, knows that that's coming from inside of him, his innate resilience will kick in, and by the time he pulls that putter back, he's good to go. That's it. That's it. The minute we look outside and blame our feelings on the outside, we are not going to recover. We have to it'll be a coincidence if we do. We won't even recover. We could still make a putt even if you don't recover, but not often. If you look inside, we activate, as I said, our innate resilience, which is a byproduct of our psychological immune system kicking in. And that's how it works. That's how it works. Even in the course of this conversation, tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm going to be. The mere fact that we're looking inside, that we're looking into how the mind works and not outside, we both feel better since we started talking. It's just that it's a fait accompli. It's just the way it is. I mean, by the way, it's a great perk of doing this work because you feel good a lot. So exactly. the minute you look inside and don't talk about all the extraneous nonsense and delve into it and try to cope with it and fix it and blame it on how we feel and all this stuff, we have just looking in this. We've now jumped the boundaries of time and we've walked from here to here, on the spectrum, and that's what happens to performers.
You said earlier that top performers are people who are really good at what they do. When they talk about what they're thinking about or how they're feeling in that moment, it's there. They're just performing. They're just doing their thing. They're in that zone, the flow zone, a lot of people call it. And so what I'm hearing you say is understanding that the inside out paradigm gets you into that zone as soon as the thought hits you that, this is all inside of me, your psychological immune system kicks in and brings you into that zone of not, no superficial thinking, no worries. You're just doing what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I had something happen this morning when I left the house. My wife, my wife was downstairs in the gym and she came up and she told me about this email that she got, and she told me she was really up in her head and her thinking was really getting the better of her. Now she has a very good understanding of this work, but she was not in a good place, and I felt her pain. I love her to death, and I really felt her pain, and I started to go down with her. Interesting. And I got in the shower, got dressed, got in the car, and I got it's a 10-minute drive here to the office. And about a minute into the ride, I called her, and I'm like, "We're good. We're good. We're good." It just, my head cleared. I knew better than to kind of join the pity party. It just, my feelings were screaming at me, "You're not seeing this right. She's not seeing this right. Don't take the bait here." Now, she wasn't intense. She just was upset. It's fine. We all get upset. And I started to get upset. Now, I got in the car and I didn't go there. I was still upset, but I just rode with the upset. I didn't try to fix the upset. Big difference, okay? And it occurred to me 30 seconds into this trip to the office that, whoa, this is fine. This is good. It was about our daughter, my youngest kid. It was like, this is good for her. This is great. Whoa, I called Liz up, my wife, and I'm like, "Babe, you're not seeing this right. And in a second, she woke up to it. And it was like, whoa, what just happened? Like 5 minutes ago, we were ready to kill somebody. And all of a sudden, we're like, this is good. This is what we want, right? Crazy. Our perspective. So the way to describe that, the way that looks in real time is that we ride this roller coaster you can call it a roller coaster of psychological functioning, mind, moods, thinking, whatever, right? So the top of the roller coaster is pure clarity, clear head. Then we get down here, we're jammed to the brink. We can't see. We're in this low end of the roller coaster where our vision is blocked. We're like got Vaseline over our eyes or something. So all of a sudden, we're plunging downward, and our head's just filling with thought. So of course our perspective is getting obscured. We're not seeing it right. Now, I think we kind of have a choice, and again, it's not really a conscious choice. It's a choice based on where you are on that spectrum, on your level of understanding. But it's still a choice, I suppose. We have a choice where we could get out of the roller coaster car, or pull the emergency brake, get out of the car, try to fix it, and in essence stall it out, right? Or we could hang on for dear life and go whoosh, and we're right back up again.
Right.
Now,
so what you're saying is that when you have, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you have a negative thought or feeling, feeling anxious and nervous or angry or upset or whatever it is, instead of trying to fight it and fix it, you allow your.
Yeah, it's like just think about roller coasters. Actually, now, I'm thinking about it. People love roller coasters, right? A lot of people do, right? So, can you imagine if you were on a roller coaster, top of the car, top of the roller coaster, and you didn't know how they worked, and all of a sudden you went, wait, so you didn't know that it goes back up. So, oh my gosh, I'm plunging right into I'm going to die, right? Well, the reason that not only do we embrace it, we love it. People love the exhilaration of it, but they would not love the exhilaration of it if they didn't know how the system worked, how the mind worked. The reason that they love it is because they know they're going back up. And the mind is the same way. In other words, and Liz and I this morning were a good example of this. We were embroiled. We were okay. Then we're plunging down, and we hung on. We didn't pull the emergency brake and try to fix something that's not even broken. That's just how the mind works. Sometimes you get jammed up in thought. And we didn't attribute the thought to this, that, or that. We just hung on, and before you know it, we're back up here, and this whole situation is looking different. Our perspective had cleared. It's amazing, just amazing. Now, that's not to say that in a different time and place, I could get all up in my head again. I might, but not for long. Not for long, because I know how the system works, and I know that I'm going to be all right. And so will my wife, and so will my daughter, and so will the world. It's just the way it is. And again, that all comes down to understanding. That all comes down to understanding. And it's not a trick or anything. It's just how the system works. And this is, back to your question about my work with people. They are very much like this conversation. We're just pointing out these analogies, metaphors, whatever, of how the mind works, with hope that something sparks that pilot light inside of the other person.
Perfect. And it seems to me too that when you do it or when you're not trying to you're not trying to fight your feelings or force yourself or do exercises or techniques or whatever, that leaves you with a lot of excess energy as opposed to what if you were doing it. Would you say that's about right?
Oh my gosh. The people who understand how the mind works, which you just nailed, they conserve energy naturally. They could go all day. The most exhausting thing, so you look at a tennis player like Roger Federer, okay? In my mind, a great example of someone who understands the human mind. Now, he may not be able to talk it like this, but he understands it. He's close to this end of the spectrum. There's just no doubt. Never gets hurt. He looks effortless out there on the court. He's still a great player in his 30s. Every sign. He's just a nice guy. He's attractive. I mean, everything about the guy just reeks of understanding. And what you find is that players who because he understands how the mind works, he lives on the top end of the roller coaster more often, thus he plays better. Now he's still going to be prone to the low highs and lows. It's just the way it goes, but he doesn't have these massive dips, most likely. He's more this kind of thing. So he lives in consciousness or clarity more often, thus he performs well. Now, to be clear, the most exhausting thing a person can ever do is look outside for answers. You ever see an athlete who doesn't look like he or she is in good shape, but they have amazing stamina? It's always chalked up to biology, which I suppose plays a part, I guess. I chalk it up to understanding. Like, it's, if you understand how the mind works, your passion just I mean, it just comes through. I mean, you live in passion, and a passionate player is what we're looking for. We're not looking for a fighter or a grinder or a worker. We're looking for a passionate player. And we're just using words, but it's a whole different vibe. Absolutely. And passionate people can go all day. They can just go, 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 go.
And I mean, this seems to be true, in everything, and not just in performance in sports. But we all know people who seem to have more hours in the day than the rest of us. They always have excess energy. They're always going. They can always, they'll go to work, they'll work their asses off, they'll jump out and have fun with friends, then they'll go to the gym, and then, they just seem to have all this. And whenever I talk to these people, I'd say 99% of them seem to have this understanding. They might, as you said, they might not be able to verbalize it, but they understand. It's amazing to see the difference between those people and the people who don't. They're the people who are always complaining that they don't have enough time, they don't have enough energy, they're always tired, and all that stuff.
Absolutely. Time is a great one to talk about, I think. I think that's the really underlying point you're making, is that, look to people. If you want examples of people who understand the mind, look to people who have time. People who got no time, they're too busy, they have all these demands, their work is this, they're famous, or they're this, that, and the other thing, whatever. Those are people who just don't understand the mind. There's always time. I mean, time is just a made-up thing anyway, but that's a whole other discussion that you don't have to get into. But people who understand where their feelings come from, let's put it that way, they have time. Even when they don't feel good, they have time. So sometimes we get in these discussions about the difference between values or character or belief systems versus understanding, right? So I always say, well, I have a belief system, but it's personal. It's my belief system. I would never teach that to somebody else. What I teach to other people, including my own children, by the way, is how the mind works. That's universal. I don't care about my personal belief system is my own thinking. That's the biology. That's my intellect. That's my personality, which is my intellect plus my life experience. But what we want to teach is, we want to get in front of that. We want to teach these principles that we have in common, what human beings have in common. So an example of that would be, I always say, well, it's my belief that if I'm walking into a Starbucks and there's someone behind me, that I should hold that door open for somebody. That's my belief. Now, maybe that sounds reasonable. Maybe it doesn't. I don't care. That's my belief, right? But I would never teach people to do that, not even my kids. I would never say, hey, my oldest son's name is Ryan. Hey, Ryan, you got to hold the door open for people. That's the right thing to do. No, I would never do that. Never, ever. What I would teach Ryan is that his feelings come from him. So when his head's clear, he's going to feel loving and giving and understanding and compassionate. When his head's cluttered, he's going to be prone to judgment, and he's going to get insular and isolated and feel like he's not part of something. Maybe even rage or hate when his head's cluttered. But that's got nothing to do with the world out there. That's got to do with the natural ebbs and flows of thought. Now, people who know that, in my mind, will hold the door open for somebody when they don't want to, because they'll know it's not about that person. So I don't have to teach my belief system. I just have to remind people how the system works. And lo and behold, what I have found is that my own children, my clients, generally do cool things for people. They just do. I had an amazing tweet from one of my players on the PGA Tour today. And I don't know what to do with it. I was so, I mean, it was such a terrible situation, which I'll describe in a second, but the way what he said about it was so amazing. It was more important than winning the Masters to me. And that's important. So the tweet was something like, I'm so sad about the terrorism attacks in Paris. And then he says, I'm going to get it close to right. He said, terrorism shows nothing but a lack of understanding. I was like, oh my God.
That's amazing.
That shows understanding. He didn't say these people are evil. We should string them up like everyone else does. We should get them and kill them. And I'm not saying any of that's right or wrong. I don't know. But he pointed to a lack of understanding, which is why people would become a terrorist. Again, they're on that spectrum, on this side of the spectrum. Now, this is a player who had a year ago knew nothing about this. And that's what he tweeted today. And that's awesome stuff right there. I mean, that just sums it up, that his level of understanding has now increased to the point where he's looking at other people who commit a heinous act, and he's saying they just don't get it. Their feelings are coming from them, not from the world out there. People who know that their feelings are coming from the inside have no reason to lash out at the world. It's not logical to do it. People who believe that their feelings come from the outside, guess what? They're going to lash out at the world. It's just a lack of understanding. It's not acceptable, by the way. I'm not accepting that behavior. I'm just pointing to the reason for it.
Absolutely. I think that's perfect, and that's a perfect way to kind of sum up the importance of this, because it's more, it's not just about performing better or whatever. It's about, having a better understanding, which to me seems to create better lives, better connections with people, more love in their life, more success in whatever it is that they're wanting to do, without spending the excess energy on blaming things or even giving credit to things outside of them, but realizing that it's all coming from their own thinking. Yeah. That's great. I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for being here. You guys watching this should go check out GarretKramer.com. The link's on the page that you're seeing this video on. He's got a couple of books. Book Still Power seems to me to deal with a lot of this stuff, which seems very, very cool. And yeah.
The new book deals with it even more, actually.
Excellent.
So it kind of takes it to Still Power was written really to kind of ease my way into it, where an 8th grader could read it. I wanted a young kid to be able to read it, not like a young teenager or whatever. The Path of No Resistance kind of comes at it a little harder, but whatever. They're both okay, I guess.
And they can get.
I'm sorry, say that again.
They can get both those books at your website, right?
On our website or Amazon. Yeah, there's Amazon links. Yeah.
So thank you very much for being here. I hope to catch up with you at some point in the future as well. And guys, I hope you enjoyed the interview. I hope you go check out his amazing blog and his books, and that you get a lot from this. Thanks for listening.
It was great fun.
Okay.